Research shows that the fastest growing age group amongst Facebook users in South Africa is the over 60s, while Twitter-like platforms are crossing the urban-rural divide. This says new users continue to be drawn to platforms as diverse as LinkedIn and WhatsApp. For more on the social media landscape, Arthur Goldstuck, Managing Director at Worldwide Works, he joins us in studio. Welcome.
Good evening, Eric.
Lovely to have you here. So in the 60s, so I wonder if those are people checking on their children. Why is this the fastest growing age group?
They're checking on their children and their grandchildren. I think one of the biggest uses of Facebook across all age groups is putting up photos. And especially when you have kids, then the amount of photos you put up there starts accelerating. And that's especially when the grandparents and the older parents start seeing the benefits of being part of this network, because it puts them directly in touch with their extended family.
So rapid growth there. I think you estimate 5.3 million South African Facebook users. Twitter also rising, 2.4 million. Wayne is certainly considering getting his account up there.
Yes,
Wayne? But we talk about this, but what are the business uses and the importance of this in business? Presumably that's what your upcoming conference is about. It's about using this to drive revenue, to change behavior?
At the moment, it's largely a marketing tool. But there are a lot of brands that are starting to see Facebook in particular as a transactional platform as well. In other words, a place where people can go and shop. It's going to take a while before that really happens in South Africa in any meaningful way. But Mxit is a social networking platform, really an instant messaging platform that's become a social network that has proven that people will spend money if you craft the whole spending experience correctly. So you have something called Mxit Moolah that people actually buy using airtime, and they can use that moolah in Mxit to make all kinds of purchases, to be able to open chat rooms, to send messages within those chat rooms for a fraction of a cent. So it feels like they're not spending money, but ultimately it amounts to something like 20 million rand a month revenue for Mxit.
Is Mxit our most popular social media platform? 9.3 million users, you say?
It's the biggest social media platform in South Africa and probably all of Africa as well, although Facebook is catching up fast. Facebook on cell phones is being used by 6.8 million South Africans. So clearly that's a challenger to Mxit.
You know, I think when you look at the woes of Facebook when it listed, and beyond that it has failed to monetize that whole infrastructure. So it's a big party. It's a fun place. Can you go beyond that and for instance, tell us how FreshRand, which loves Facebook, and they love, what's the other one they like? Twitter with that.
Michael Jordan.
Can they quantify the value of all this activity?
They can probably quantify it as well as they can quantify the impact of advertising. Because what all this is doing is positioning them as the most forward-thinking bank in the country, and also the bank that is in tune with the needs of an emerging market. And by emerging market, I'm also talking about a youth market that is wondering if it should get involved in this 20th century concept called banking, or sign on to the traditional banks. So FNB in particular positions itself as not being a traditional bank. And that's the real value that this brings them. You can't really put a specific monetary value on that. When you look what's happening to Absa, that have admitted that they're probably going to end up being 1.5 years behind FNB in bringing a banking app onto smartphones, then you can see that young people in particular, are abandoning the brand because it doesn't seem to speak to them, even though that might just be perception and not reality.
Also, using the term emerging market in a different context, if you look at developing economies, would you classify South Africans' behavior on social media as emerging market? And can one say that there's a difference in how you behave?
In fact, you can look at the urban-rural divide in South Africa. And there are aspects of even the urban market that look more like emerging markets and aspects that look more like developed markets. But on the whole, South Africa is a very different market to most, for example, North American or Western European markets. Our users behave differently, and also the tools that are available to them are very different. So Mxit, for example, was a massive success here long before the Americans woke up to the idea of online instant messaging tools. WhatsApp is now the big challenger to Mxit. WhatsApp has risen from nowhere to around 4.6 million users in South Africa right now. And 18 months ago, no one had heard of them. You probably also haven't heard of them, but it's a little app that you download onto very ordinary phones, and you can send messages to people who also have WhatsApp at no cost, or at the cost of the data, which is a fraction of a cent that you can't even measure. And WhatsApp in particular is the opportunity for users in Western markets to start experiencing what South African users have been doing on Mixit for a long time.
Now, Arthur, what happened to BlackBerry? Why? I mean, everything 3-4 years ago, everything was BlackBerry BBMs. Now, no one's got a BlackBerry anymore except me.
Me too.
Me too.
Okay.
But you're right, no one's got a BlackBerry anymore except everyone sitting around this table. So that really actually symbolizes the debate. It's because we believe what the American media is saying. And BlackBerry is, to all intents and purposes, dead in America, or at least they're dying, unless they do something very dramatic to resuscitate the brand. But in emerging markets, in developing markets, it's a massive brand. In South Africa, BlackBerry came from 4% market share at the end of 2010 to 18% market share in the middle of 2012. And the brand momentum is such that we expect that share to keep growing over the next 18 months because BlackBerry meets specific needs in developing markets. And those needs revolve around the high cost of data. What BlackBerry does is gives you an affordable internet access package. It gives you a predictable cost on that data, unlimited use of the internet on your phone. And that's a very compelling value proposition across Africa.
You know, I'm curious about social media, and I really doubt its value because I've seen it being applied in good times. But let's take banks, for instance. When the banks were going under in the United States, getting closed one after the other, or companies, can you tell us of an experience where a bank used Facebook to communicate with its clients in horrible times when they're closing down to make them feel better or to tell them to come and get the money? Or because that's never pointed out. It's always when it's good, when it's good news.
Yes. Well, a bank that weathered the crisis quite well and uses a variety of social media and online tools, all the way from YouTube to Facebook to having interesting presences in 3D virtual worlds, for example, is Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo kept their brand strong at a time when all the other brands were looking.
Well, that's a very good bank anyway. That was never going to go under. But a company that's going under using Facebook to craft its message.
The reputation
that
management.
never seems to happen.
The problem is that when a company is going under, it's in a state of crisis management, and that's the worst time to be trying to develop a social media strategy. You already need to be knowing what you're doing in social media at times of crisis. You can't suddenly invent your presence on social media because no one will believe it. It's not an authentic voice that's coming across.
Very good point.
Arthur, if you were speaking to small business owners, which platform would you recommend they use? Does it depend on the industry or just on their own personal style?
It depends on the business itself, whether the business is appropriate for any of those networks, but very much you hit the nail on the head. It depends on the person running the business or the senior management of the business. What's made FirstRand particularly effective and FNB particularly effective is that senior management has bought into social networks. In fact, that was a point made at our conference this morning by a lot of the speakers, and very strongly made, is that buy-in of senior management is critical to social media success for a large brand, but even for a small brand. If the brand owner has a presence and a personality in social networks, that can make a massive impact on that brand. Zappos is a fantastic example. The online shoe sellers in the United States, they became a brand of choice for most people looking for shoes entirely because of their online voice and their voice in social networks.
And again, I suppose it needs to be authentic and therefore honest because social media is such an honest terrain.
Correct, and people will call you out very fast if you are trying to pull the social wool over their eyes.